Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanelle Neilson, and I'm joined today by Nicole Atwood. Nicole, thanks for being here.
I am so excited to be on your podcast. I've been looking forward to it.
I'm excited too, and we had a while to look forward to it because we had some tech issues, and this is our second time getting together and recording. So I'm so glad I can hear your voice, and everyone can hear your voice, and we can get this recorded today. This is going to be a good one. This is actually a topic that I have been wanting to talk about on the show for a while. Nicole is a certified prenatal, postnatal personal trainer, and she specializes in core and pelvic floor health. And that is something that we don't talk about that much, but I think is super useful for moms. So I'm excited to learn from her today. Let me tell you a little bit more about Nicole. So she works with women worldwide to reconnect, heal, and strengthen their bodies, starting with the foundation of the body, which is the core and pelvic floor. Her passion is to empower and educate women that healing is possible. And I love this part. She says it's possible no matter how long it's been. So I know we think of this as, a postnatal issue, but this is really a mom issue, no matter how long ago you've had your babies. So I love that. So Nicole, I'm looking forward to learning from you today. Let's start off with, tell us just a little bit about what got you interested in this line of work.
Yes, and you know what? That I could talk about that probably our whole time too, so I'll try to condense it down. But I really think that my starting point is actually, something you hear a lot. It was a life trial that sparked a new passion. I had always been fit my entire life. I've always enjoyed exercising, just never really struggled that way before. And then I got pregnant in 2014 with my first baby, my little girl. And I had a really active pregnancy, and it just never occurred to me that I would have problems after having my baby with my body. Like, it just was never on my mind. And my husband and I even talked about it all the time. We're like, oh, you got this. It's going to be so easy. You're going to get right back into shape and exercising. And I kind of called it karma for a while. Like, oh, it's because I thought I wouldn't struggle that I did. And I had my little girl, and it was a really big reality check. I had a kind of a forced episiotomy and a 4th degree tear. So I had a lot of trauma to my pelvic floor muscles from the birth. And I waited till my 6-week checkup, and I went in, and he checked my episiotomy tear and the stitches and kind of poked around my stomach, and he gave me the all clear. And I remember specifically asking him, so I'm good to do any type of exercise? He said, yep, you're great. And so that same day, I started with a 12-week high plyometric program, because back then I really enjoyed high plyo programs. And I lacked no motivation and no dedication. I was dedicated. I was doing this. And I really felt like that created a blind spot to a lot of symptoms that I was experiencing during that time. And I ignored them, and I finished this 12-week program. And it was after I finished this 12-week program that I had, lost the baby weight. I had toned up. I gained, arm muscles and leg muscles, but I had this really round belly, and I'm sure I'm petite, and it didn't match. I had no strength. I looked like I was still about, 7 months pregnant, and it was just very odd. And I started to be really confused. Like, why did I have no change in my core? Like, what is going on? And then that kind of got me to start thinking back to all these symptoms that I had been ignoring. And so during that 12-week time when I was doing this high plyo program, I was having urinary incontinence. So I was peeing my pants. And, back then, I didn't realize that was an issue. That was a red flag. And I remember 2 distinct experiences. I was at Planet Fitness, and I was doing jumping jacks, and I did a jumping jack, and I peed. I just peed at Planet Fitness right then and there. And I paused, and I was like, that is new. I don't know what
I wasn't expecting that.
I was so unexpected, but I didn't know. And so I just finished the workout and went home. And then I remember another time I was standing in line with my husband at a restaurant, and we were about to order food. And now I call it the sneeze pee to my clients. And I sneezed. And I just, again, I lost control of my bladder, and I peed, and I turned to my husband and I said, we have a problem. just peed. He was like, okay, how much? And I was like, a lot. And I didn't realize that, urinary incontinence, that's a red flag that your body is telling you something's not right. And then I also was experiencing intense lower back pain that definitely got significantly worse when I was doing exercising. And then I had what I talk to my clients about, the jelly belly. And that's where I would do core exercises. I would be doing sit-ups or crunches or, push-ups or planks. And I was feeling nothing in my tummy. I had no tension, no muscle activation or recruitment. And I didn't feel anything. I was so disconnected from my body. And, those symptoms, I started to try to research. And you have to understand, 3 years ago, and even just 3 years ago, there wasn't very much information out there online about core and pelvic floor dysfunctions. You Pinterest it now or you Google it, and there is so many resources that it's almost overwhelming. But even just 3 years ago, there wasn't very much. So I started Googling pregnant looking belly and just trying to find what was wrong with me, what was going on. And I eventually found a really short article about diastasis recti. It wasn't very informative, but just enough for me to be okay, I think this is what I have. And it kind of described a little self-test you could do. And so I did that. And that was the first time I realized something is not right with my body. Something is not okay. And so I went to my doctor and I asked him about it. And honestly, and I know this is the case for so many women, the doctor was just no help. He was just kind of yeah, you look weird, your stomach doesn't match. I'm and of course that was an insecurity I already had. And he was just confirming that to me. And I remember leaving his office and I just cried in the car because I felt so defeated in my body. And then I went to a physical therapist as well, and she was more helpful. She confirmed I had diastasis. She gave me a little bit of help and direction, but she really made me feel, again, very defeated and hopeless. She gave me the analogy of a rubber band, and she likened my body to a rubber band. And if you stretch a rubber band so far, the rubber band's just not going to go to how it was before. And she said, your body stretched during pregnancy, and you might be able to heal a little bit, but you're just kind of going to have to get used to it because this is kind of how it is.
But that's not really hopeful words at all. That's pretty discouraging.
I was and you know what, but that was kind of the turning point. I left her office that day and I just thought, and I get emotional talking about this because it's so emotional. I left her office thinking, I'm going to prove you wrong. I couldn't accept that my amazing body, which is so amazing and smart and had a beautiful baby, was already past the point of healing. I just couldn't accept that. And so I decided if nobody's going to help me, if I can't find help, I'm going to help myself. So I started researching my heart out, and I ended up finding a UK-based program that was specifically for core and pelvic floor healing. And to make an incredibly long emotional healing journey short, that program changed my life. It's MuTu System, and I am now a trained pro for that program. And that program opened my world and my eyes to a new way to heal. And now that's exactly what I do. I help and I teach and I educate women that there's a better way to heal and that you can heal no matter what. And that I just want to be that advocate for women who are struggling just like I was back then.
I love that. I always love those stories when people have hard times and turn it into helping other people. That's so cool to me, and that's so awesome that you have done that. Now, to back up a little bit, I want to talk about, I always say it differently, so you're going to have to correct my pronunciation. You just said it. Diastasis recti. How do you pronounce it?
So, you know what? People say it differently. Diastasis recti, diastasis recti. There's so many different ways. I say it diastasis recti, but
diastasis.
If you say it different, that's okay.
Okay. Well, explain to people who aren't familiar with that term what it is. I have a little bit of training in that because for a while I taught stroller strides, and I have a fitness background like you do, and I taught stroller strides, and because that is a postnatal program, we actually did some exercises that focused on that. So I'm interested to hear how your program kind of aligns with that. But tell people who aren't familiar what we're even talking about.
Yeah, so diastasis recti, it's abdominal separation. So to kind of understand it, you need to understand a little bit about the anatomy of the core. So the core it's wrapped in different muscle layers. So you have the transverse, which is your deep stabilizer. You have your internal, external obliques, and you have your rectus muscles. And so those rectus muscles, they're the most superficial layer. Sometimes they're referred to as the six-pack muscle because when someone has really low fat body percentage and they're in shape, you can kind of see the six-pack of it. And so those rectus muscles, they're naturally in two halves. So you have the right half and the left half of the rectus muscles, and they are connected together by connective tissue. And so when you have diastasis recti, it is a separation, an unnatural separation of those two rectus muscles. The connective tissue has either become very weak, it's broken down, you have weakened core structure, and those two halves of those rectus muscles start to pull apart and unnaturally separate from one another.
Okay, and I think that it goes unnoticed in a lot of people. I think it's almost more clear in someone who's built like you, that's really small and petite. I have a good friend who had this really bad. She's had 5 boys, and she had that with her last 2. She had kind of a big separation there, and so even though she's super tiny, she had a big belly and she felt super self-conscious about it. But I think what happens if you're a little bit a bigger woman anyway and you're already carrying a little extra weight, I think it's easy to just blame it on the weight and say like, oh, well, I just need to lose weight. I'm heavier than I need to be. And so people overlook it and don't even think that there might be an underlying issue.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to be in tune with your body, and looking for those symptoms of diastasis. So urinary incontinence, lower back pain. If you don't have any core strength, you can feel that. And, a lot of women say like, I feel so weak in my core. Like, those are symptoms that, it might be an underlying issue of diastasis.
That's interesting. Okay, and back to the urinary incontinence. I'm glad that you broke it down for us with those specific examples, because I think that, for me anyway, I hear urinary incontinence and I think, that's what Depends are for. Like, they're serious. You might be out walking around or doing whatever and you just pee. But the sneezing thing, I mean, that's pretty common. Like, I have a good friend, we used to go walking. She moved. But anyway, when we would go walking, she would literally stop. We'd be walking, doing our power walk, and she would stop and cross her legs to sneeze.
Yes.
Because otherwise she would pee.
You have to prepare for it. Like,
yes.
If you have urinary incontinence, you have to prepare for that sneeze. Yes. And that's stress incontinence. So, stress incontinence, like sneezing, like very like, quick motions, like if you're doing exercising and all of a sudden you jump high and stuff like that, stress incontinence, and those pelvic floor muscles can't handle the load, then there's incontinence that happens from that. And, it is so common. And, we joke about it. And that's what I work most with women on, is urinary incontinence. That's a big thing why women come to me. And it's like we joke about it, we make light of it. But really, it's something that we need to address and not just kind of accept. I feel like most of us accept, like, well, I've been having leaking for years now. And it's like, why are we just settling for this? We deserve better.
Totally. But I think for a lot of us, we do. We all know, well, she's peeing her pants, so I guess it's normal, so it's fine. So talk to us about what we can do to strengthen the pelvic floor. And just to be clear, you're saying this isn't something we have to live with, right?
Yes, absolutely. And is it common? Yes, it's very common. But just because it's common doesn't make it normal. Okay. It's not normal. It is a red flag. Your body is trying to say, I cannot handle the loads you're placing on me. The pelvic floor, something is happening that's causing you to leak, and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, for sure. So talk to us about what we can do. Like, in your work with women, what do you do if they come to you with this problem? Is it exercises that you're working through with them, or is it lifestyle changes? What kind of things?
So, and this goes, so urinary incontinence, diastasis recti, and even if you don't have like, a dysfunction or, necessarily like a core injury, even if you just have overall like core and pelvic floor weakness, it's the same things, but it's not just exercises. It's really a full body approach. Because if it makes sense to think about it. Our body doesn't ever work in isolation. We're a working system. And so, especially for urinary incontinence, kind of the standard thing we're given is Kegels. That's kind of like, yes. If you have urinary incontinence, like you pee, okay, do Kegels. You feel weak, okay, do Kegels. But, that's lacking. Kegels aren't just the answer. So, kind of to give a little bit of pelvic floor anatomy as well, our pelvic floor, those muscles, they extend all the way from front and actually all the way back to our rectum, to all the way back there. And so a Kegel is a very isolated movement just towards the front of the pelvic floor. And so you're really neglecting, half of those pelvic floor muscles. And something that happens a lot of times, like, do Kegels when you're at the stoplight, do Kegels standing in line at the grocery store, like do 100 Kegels a day. Right. And something that tends to happen is you are doing so many Kegels and you can actually create a hypertonic or a tight pelvic floor. And so, a hypertonic pelvic floor has a lot of times the same symptoms as a weak pelvic floor. And sometimes we think tight equals strong or tight equals functional, and that's not the case. And so if you're only doing, 100 Kegels a day, you actually might be contributing to the issues. We need a full body approach to it. So we need to, number one, exercise. Yes, we need restorative and rehabilitative exercises, but that are not just focusing in isolation on the pelvic floor, but that are also bringing in the core as well. So the core and the pelvic floor, they're a working system. They work together. And when we start to train them together, that's when you start to create a functional core and pelvic floor. So there's definitely specific exercises that you can do that bring in the core and the pelvic floor, correct engagement of both together. And then we need to address alignment. We need to address if you are having what is the cause from it? And so we kind of think if you're having urinary incontinence, it must just be a weak pelvic floor issue. And that might not be the case. It might be a weak pelvic floor, but it could be a tight pelvic floor, or urinary incontinence could be, a symptom to a bigger issue such as prolapse. So when women come to me with urinary incontinence, I educate them, I teach them, we work through exercises, but I always encourage women to go see a pelvic physical therapist as well to get an internal exam, because we want to make sure that we're addressing it correctly. So whether it's coming from a weakened state, a tight state, or a deeper issue such as a prolapse.
That is so interesting. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that is, you're exactly right. We just hear Kegels, Kegels, Kegels. That's the only thing that I've ever heard really for what to do for that problem. So that's super cool. So give me an example of a type of exercise. Are they exercises we're seeing in other things? Like if you do yoga, are you going to be hitting some of these exercises? If you're, a runner, or are these specific exercises for core and pelvic floor, or are they exercises that you would see in another exercise class?
Yeah, and you see them sprinkled here and there in other exercises and stuff. So something to realize as well is what exercises you're doing matters. So especially if you have diastasis, there's very specific exercises that are going to worsen this injury. And same with the pelvic floor. If you have a weak pelvic floor, if you're having urinary incontinence issues, some exercises are going to make it worse. And some exercises are going to make it better. But what also matters is how you're doing exercises. So, I could give you a list of correct exercises and you can go do them. But if you're not doing them correctly, then you're not benefiting your body. And what I mean by correctly is correctly activating the core and the pelvic floor. So, a lot of women and men don't even actually know how to properly engage the transverse. So I kind of mentioned that the deepest stabilizing layer of the core is the transverse. And a lot of people brace instead of actually engage correctly. And so the exercises that, especially that I give or that are in the MuTu System program, I'm a trained pro for, they're examples like heel slides or ball squeezes. Squats are really great for the core and the pelvic floor. But it's more important how you're recruiting and activating your core and your pelvic floor during the movements.
Interesting. Okay, that totally makes sense. So even if you're doing some of these exercises like squats, that's something a lot of people are doing squats, but we still might not be hitting these muscles and getting where we need to get to strengthen those deepest muscles. So that's cool. Yeah, it's good to know, because I think that you can really think oh yeah, well, I got this. Nicole said do squats. I'm doing squats. I'm good. Why am I still peeing my pants? Well, because there's more to what you need to do, and alignment and the way you're holding your body and all those things. So that's good. Now talk to us a little bit about why this happens. So are there things that we're doing in pregnancy that contribute to a weakened core and pelvic floor, or is it just part of pregnancy? Does everyone get it?
Absolutely. So kind of both. And it's important to understand. So diastasis, pelvic floor dysfunctions, they're not just women issues. We kind of view them as just women problems. But anybody can get diastasis. Anybody can have pelvic floor dysfunctions, even men, because they have them too. And I've worked with men that have diastasis. But we really associate these issues with women because of pregnancy. Pregnancy is a high load event, and it can absolutely kind of worsen these issues. And so with pregnancy, and our body is smart. Like our body knows what it needs to do. So, almost all of women in their third trimester and immediately postpartum have some level of diastasis. That is it's normal and it's natural for that. But it's when the body doesn't heal naturally that the diastasis starts to become an issue. So during pregnancy, there's really two main things that you can do to kind of help limit urinary incontinence and, diastasis, but also to aid in that natural healing process. And the first thing is alignment. And so when I talk about alignment, I'm not talking about posture. So posture is the way that we look, and it's very subjective. But alignment is the way that we are biomechanically stacked. How is our rib cage stacked over our abdomen? How's our abdomen stacked over our pelvis? And this matters. Our body is a working system, and we need to be aligned correctly. And so diastasis, hernias, prolapses, these are pressure issues. And pregnancy is a high pressure event. And so when we have, poor alignment, so for example, when we get this big belly, our center of gravity starts to change. And so oftentimes we kind of overcorrect, by, kind of like that classic pregnancy walk, we arch our back, we kind of hobble along. And that creates even more pressure, pushing against those rectus muscles, pushing down into the pelvic floor. And so if you can maintain good alignment during pregnancy, you can kind of help keep that pressure system neutralized. And then the second thing that you can do, and this is so important, is staying connected to your core and your pelvic floor. So, and I know during my first pregnancy, I was like, hey, I'm pregnant now. I don't have to do any core exercises. And it's true that you need to avoid a lot of traditional core exercises during pregnancy, but you still need to stay connected to your transverse, to that deep stabilizing muscle, and you need to stay connected to your pelvic floor through, again, these kind of restorative, rehabilitative type of exercises, because mind to muscle connection is huge, and we get very disconnected from our core and our pelvic floor during pregnancy. And so as you start to, continue to stay connected and train these muscles throughout your pregnancy, you're going to benefit not only yourself during pregnancy, but during the labor and the delivery and during postpartum. If you kind of stay connected to these muscles and keep them, primed and strong and connected, you're going to heal much better postpartum as well.
Yeah, I mean, that just makes sense, right? Because you've kept those strong. But I think that what you said is really key. A lot of women feel like, well, I can't work my core right now. I don't need to, and I can't. And so how do you, besides, is it just that? Is it just the way you hold yourself, alignment, or how can you work those muscles? Is there more that you can do? And tell us also what to avoid. So what specific exercises we should and should not be doing.
Yeah, and everybody is different, and especially you don't just give, blanket advice like you shouldn't run, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, because, it doesn't work for everybody, and some women are still going to choose that, but there's certain things you should avoid. So, any movement that has you, especially as you get further along in your pregnancy, any movement that is causing, intense pressure on those rectus muscles, so push-ups, burpees, planks, obviously sit-ups and crunches and stuff like that. Anything that is causing, kind of those pressure on those rectus muscles we want to avoid. Running is a really hot debate during, pregnancy and postpartum and everything. And I would never tell a woman not to run or not to do this. But you have to think about what kind of load is it placing, especially on that pelvic floor. You already have, all this weight from, pregnancy and everything from the baby. And if you are running, you're creating another load that's on the pelvic floor. And so you kind of have to think, yes, maybe your body can handle it, but is it going to be best? Is going to be more beneficial for your body? And so kind of just thinking about, what kind of loads and pressures are you placing on your core and your pelvic floor?
Yeah, which is something I think that we don't think about, that it's good to even have this conversation, because I think that a lot of us, that's not even the question that we're thinking about. Well, what will this do to my core and pelvic floor? No, we're not even going there. So it's good to have your expertise and bring that into our minds.
And we're so focused on, is it going to be okay for the baby, that we forget to ask, but is it okay for us? And we we're just so focused on keeping that baby healthy, which of course we need to, but we also need to think, okay, is this going to benefit me? Or is there a better solution is there something else I can sub in? Instead of running, maybe I could power walk. Walking is a very kind of pushed aside form of exercise, but I mean, it has multitudes of benefits. And, you're probably going to benefit your body more by walking than you are necessarily doing, 10-mile runs every day. And of course, every woman chooses for themselves, but benefiting the body, there's different ways to go about it to protect that core and that pelvic floor.
Yeah, Wes, and I will put out there, I love to walk. I'm a big walker. That's my favorite kind of exercise. Walking and yoga is what I love. So walking is good.
It is, yes.
Yes. Now, I want to talk in the few minutes that we have left just about postpartum and beyond. So we think about the postpartum period as, right after you've had the baby. But you say it's never too late. So if you've been walking around with this belly for, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, it's not too late to build that back up?
Absolutely not. Our body is never past capability of healing. We place lots of blockers in our body's way to heal. And most of the clients I work with, they're actually women who are in their late 40s to late 60s. That's who I work with most of the time. I actually am not working with a lot of newly postpartum women. It's women who are older, and they see, incredible healing from, applying this. And I've already kind of talked about, alignment and stuff. But what you can do postpartum and beyond to help if you have diastasis, if you have core and pelvic floor weakness, any type of dysfunctions, there's, again, those really 3 key building blocks. And one that I haven't talked about yet is breathing. So I bet, you didn't know that there was, a more optimal way to breathe. It's like, well, we just breathe. But when we have core and pelvic floor dysfunctions, the way that we breathe matters. And so there's kind of 2 main types of breathing. There's belly breathing, and then there's 3-dimensional breathing. And a lot of people are belly breathers. And what I mean by that, like if you place a hand on your tummy and just take a big breath in and, do a few breaths, is your belly the main mover? Is it expanding and contracting, mostly? Or do you have movement up into the rib cage? And so I teach this 3-dimensional breathing because, again, these are pressure issues. And if you're belly breathing, you're creating even more pressure in that core and in that pelvic floor. And so teaching a more optimal way to breathe through the rib cage is important. And breathing also helps with mind to muscle connection. I've mentioned that before, but it's very powerful. If we're not connected to our muscles, how can we strengthen these muscles and heal these muscles if we don't have a mind to muscle connection? And breathing really helps aid in that. Kind of that mind to muscle connection.
Yes, you are speaking my language. That is a lot, what we talk about in yoga, and definitely how that all comes together. Well, I hope for my listeners that you were doing what I was doing as Nicole was talking. I put my hand on my belly. I felt what moved, and I took some deep breaths there. I think that that's very instructive to do that deep breathing. I mean, that's a simple thing that we can do and kind of see just a little check-in. Where are we at,
Absolutely.
Yeah, as well as these other things that you've talked about, to know that, maybe it's common, but it's not normal to pee your pants when you sneeze. So it's good. I think that this has been such good information for our listeners out there. I love it. Just real quick, can you tell us your website if people want to stop peeing their pants and want to come talk to you?
Yes, and please, there was so much that I wasn't even able to talk about. I talked for hours and hours about this. There's so much education that, of course, in our short time, I wasn't able to talk about. And so for more information, or just if anybody wants to, shoot me messages for, advice for their own situations, my website is coremindful.com. And I have, I've been blogging there for a while about, my personal recovery tips and tricks and stuff. But there's more information on that. And I'm working on education and resource sections as well right now for that. And then I also post a lot of tips and advice on my Instagram and my Facebook, which is also Core Mindful.
Awesome. Okay, well, you guys be sure to go check that out, and I will link to that in the show notes. And Nicole, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my favorite thing to talk about, and every single woman needs this knowledge and needs this information.
I agree. It's awesome. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Moms Who Know. Thanks so much for listening. And if you love this episode and know of another mom who knows that when she takes care of herself, she can take better care of everyone else, please let her know about the podcast. It would mean the world to me if you would help me get this podcast out to as many listeners as I can. So if you liked what you heard, please take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review and share this with your friends. Join us next week for the next episode of Moms Who Know.